Hello! Hopefully you're here to learn how to overwrite a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online using Python. And if not, so long, I bid you farewell. Let's go ahead and just start with an example. Let's say you have a data set. In this case, we're looking at an Ftp site here, and I want to turn it into a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online. So you can do that manually. Let's say we want to do storage tank locations active. This is the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Ftp site, I believe. Really, I just typed in Google Ftp GIS point layer, and this is one of the things that came up. So I'm making lots of assumptions here, but let's download this. It'll go to your downloads folder, and if you go to ArcGIS Online in your organization, here I'm using a developer account. Those are free, and it basically gives you a mock ArcGIS Online organization to use. They give you credits every month, and you can kind of play around with all the different things and that ArcGIS Online has to offer. It's different from a normal public account, and I don't believe a regular public account will let you do hosted feature layers, although that might have changed, but I don't believe it does. The thing with the developer accounts is, of course, you can't use it for any business-related needs or anything that involves making a profit, etc., etc. But so, assuming you have ArcGIS Online or Portal, so it would work for that too, you can go to your content. We'd go to Add Item from your computer, choose File, and we'd find that zip we just downloaded. In this case, I already know this is a shapefile. There's a shapefile zipped up in here. You don't need to unzip it. You can leave it zipped. You can see here it has shapefile by default. This method would work for more than what you just see here. I use this workflow for CSVs and Excel files a lot. But in this case, we're going to leave it on shapefile. We're going to leave this checked. Let's publish hosted feature layer. I would rename it something a little more, readable, legible. Then you'd add a pretty tag and hit add item. However, I put one in the oven earlier, and you would get something like this. So like we said, we got all the active storage tank locations in Pennsylvania. There's 11,000 points in there. And let's see, make sure they're actually in Pennsylvania. Alright, so there's our data. So that's how you would do this manually, and I'm sure if you're watching this, you already know how to do that. But let's say I know that this data is getting updated on a regular basis, and while I've updated this, I want it to stay current. With the latest data available from Pennsylvania DEP, you can do that manually by going to Update Data, clicking Overwrite, and then choosing the new zip file, as long as it has the same name as whatever you uploaded originally. But if you have something, maybe you have something that's changing every day, and you don't want to have to manually come in and do this every time. So we're able to do that with using Python. Specifically, I think they're calling it the ArcGIS API for Python, would be the full name. Alright, so let's jump into a Python window here. I'm using PyCharm. You don't have to, you can use Notepad even, and just save it as a .py. It doesn't really matter what you're using. I guess I should say before we go any further, I'm going to assume in this tutorial that you know a little bit of Python. I'm not going to explain like what a string is and all that. However, it should be pretty easy to follow, even if you're a beginner or if you've never done Python before. I'm going to go line by line through everything in this script, so you could probably just copy what I'm doing and be good to go. Also worth noting before we get started, I'm not a Python expert by any means. I'm making this video because I noticed there doesn't seem to be anything out there on the internet currently on how to do this other than one or two kind of vague docs. So if you are a Python expert and I do something you find horribly offensive, please go ahead and leave a comment and let everyone know how I should have done something, and I promise no hard feelings. Okay, so other than needing Python, specifically you need Python 3 to do this, not Python 2. If you have ArcMap installed on your computer, you have Python 2. If you have ArcGIS Pro installed on your computer, you have Python 3. You don't actually need either of those programs to do this. We're actually going to use the ArcGIS API for Python that I mentioned earlier, and that's a free download. So let's actually get started writing this. From that, we're going to call ArcGIS.gis and import GIS in all caps. That's going to let us log into ArcGIS Online later down the road. And also, I guess, I assume if you Google the ArcGIS API for Python, you'll be able to find how to download it and install it with whatever Python software you're using. You can use pip too. I know it's in there. If you already have ArcGIS Pro installed, it actually comes with that, so you're good to go. You don't need to do any sort of setup for this. Alright, so we imported GIS to log in. We also wanted to do from ArcGIS.features import feature layer collection. I'll explain why we need that down the line. And actually, let's move on from the modules for right now. We'll come back and add some more stuff later as we come to it, and then maybe it'll be a little easier to follow if to show you what we're doing and why we're importing. So let's go ahead and write out some variables that we're going to use. The first thing we need, the most important thing, the process we did here, manually uploading this, you're going to have to do this once manually because we need something for the Python script to actually look at and update. You could use Python to upload it the first time, I guess, but I think it's easier just to do it manually as we did before. And once you do that, if you come to your item detail page and go to your URL up here, you can see it'll say item.html !ID equals, and then you'll see an item ID. I don't know what the consensus is these days. The hashtag sign, the pound sign, the tic-tac-toe sign, overview. That's because I clicked on this overview tab. You don't need that, and you might not even see it. So take everything after the equal sign and before the hashtag sign. That is your item ID. We'll go back here to our script, and we'll put item ID equals what we just copied. That's how we're going to tell our script what we want to update. And then we're going to need some variables for the part of our script that's going to log in to not even log in, to look at the FTP site and download the file we want. So for that, we're going to need to tell it our FTP host. And I like to put R in front of most of these things that have URLs or that have oh boy, is it / /? I always confuse them. Those things, one of those gets read as an escape character. So if you put R in front of it, Python will know not to do anything weird with any special characters. It'll just take everything as is. Sorry, I guess I should tell you where we're going to get this. Assuming you're doing this workflow for an FTP site, you actually don't have to. And I'll try to remember to tell you what part of the script you can skip to if you're not using an FTP site. For example, maybe your file is just getting generated on your own computer, or maybe it's on a network drive at your work office. If that's the case, you can actually skip all this FTP stuff. I'm going through it because a lot of times I have to use an FTP site, and there's there's a scenario we'll run into in a minute here that I want to cover because I think it'll be helpful to other people. Oops, getting distracted here. Alright, so on there, assuming you're using an FTP site to get your file from, if you come up to your address bar here, this first bit after FTP, I'm going to say it's /. After that part, this is your FTP host. You don't need to include anything beyond these additional /. We're going to use that in a sec. So we're going to take just this part, ftp.pasda.psu.edu. That is our host. We're going to need the path, which is going to be the rest of that URL. So if you go back and grab pub/pasda/da, and in some cases you might not even have a path, depending on how the FTP is set up. They could just have it in the root folder. I've seen that too, and in that case you can just skip this path part. And actually, I can't remember if you have to do this or not, but I'm going to put a second, well, I guess not because we have the R. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it in there. Alright, next we need our FTP file, and this one is where you might run into trouble. So if we go back to the FTP site, you might have already noticed, make this bigger, you might have already noticed that this has a date on the end. And if we kind of look through their older data, we're going to stick with storage tank locations active. You can see they updated one in April as well. Looks like they might have deleted March. Maybe they only leave it up for a month or two. But we can assume that when they update this, next month they're gonna put out 2020-06. So if we hard-coded a file name into here, what's going to happen here is when I run my script, it's going to look for 2020-05, and it'll do one of two things. Either the file is not going to be there, and it's going to give you an error, or it's going to grab last month's data. If we were to be running this in June. We can get around that, though, by using some of Python's cool built-in time features. So if we go back to our modules here, we're going to do from time import. I'm not sure what this stands for. We're just going to read it as is and call it strf time. I can't even help myself spelling it out by saying it. Alright, and what that's going to do is it will, using keywords, I guess, we'll be able to pull the current time and date information. And there are multiple ways you can do this, but I like to do it using curly brackets and the dot format method. So I'm assuming storage tank locations active is not going to change. We could do it on 2020, but oops. just replace the year there. The script will be good for 80 years. And then we're going to replace the month with a set of curly brackets. And how this works is after the end of your string, outside of your second quotation mark there, you can do dot format, parentheses, and what it'll do is that whatever you put in these parentheses, broken up by commas, it will fill them in to these spaces here. And that's handy if everything you're working with isn't necessarily a string. It'll do that for you and format everything correctly. It's also, I think it's just neat looking or tidy. So we could put 20 and then 05, and when we run this script, it would read this line as active 2020, putting 20 in the first spot and then 05 in the second spot here. But obviously that won't work, so instead we're going to use that strf time trick there, and do another set of parentheses, and we can use different keywords to call the time or date information we want. So if you go to Google and Google strf Python, or that's what I did, and this was the second or third thing that came up, or you can just go to strftime.org. This has a handy reference sheet of all the different time and date formats you can pull using the strf time module. So in our case, we want just the year without the century information. And so right here you can see %, lowercase y will give us the year without century as a 0 padded decimal number. So if the year was 2013, we'd get 13. If the year was 2007, it would give us 07. So let's go back to our script, and you want to put this in a string, so this would be quote %y closing quote, and then we also need the month padded by a 0, and that's right here. We got % lowercase m gives us the month as a 0 padded decimal. So even if we're not in November or December, it's going to give us 2 digits with a padded 0, which is what we want based on what it looks like they're doing here on their FTP site. So we want to actually put this in here again, since we had that comma in there. And case M. Alright, and here, maybe we can, let's check to see if that actually works. Okay, had to grab this off the other window. You can see it ran, and it printed the right file name we're looking for. So if we run this next month, this will be 06. Okay, let's get rid of that. Alright, we'll get rid of this for now. And the last variable we're going to do at the moment is we need to decide where we're going to download the FTP file to. So by default, when we did it earlier manually, it went to our downloads folder. I put a folder in my downloads folder that I'm going to use called AGO upload. You can put it wherever. It doesn't matter. I like to have a folder for each script and put stuff I download in there, or have a dedicated folder for my downloads for a script, just to make sure. I guess it just reduces the chance of errors for your script. And then we are going to need our username and our password for ArcGIS Online in order to log in later and overwrite the hosted feature layer. So I'm just going to call a user And we'll do my AGO username and password 123. Obviously, well, knowing my luck, someone out there will actually have this username and that will be their password. And I apologize to that person. But, you know, this is where you would put your username and password. Alright. Now that we've got some variables set up, let's go ahead and start writing the part that will actually download the data from the FTP site. Again, if you're not using an FTP site, you can skip these three parts, these three lines, and you can skip this whole section we're about to do here. Here, that's fine. Alright, so there's a built-in there's built-in FTP tools in Python, I believe. There should be. I don't remember installing anything. So if we go back to our modules up here, we are going to grab from FTP lib, so FTP library, we're going to import FTP in all caps. And then going back down here, we're gonna set a variable that's gonna represent our FTP host. So we'll just call it FTP lowercase. The stuff is case sensitive in case you're curious. Call this FTP equals, we're gonna FTP uppercase, which means we're calling this thing right here. And we're gonna put our FTP host in there, which is a variable we created up here. Our ftp.pasda.psu.edu. Alright, we're gonna have Ftp Loggin, which will tell it to log into the FTP site. In this case, this is a public-facing FTP site, so we don't actually need to know a username and password, but in your case, it might be something locked down or something that you had to create an account for. And you could just, put your username and password in here like this. Well, as a string, in quotes, but in our case, we can just leave it blank and it'll work fine. Then we need to tell it that path we're using. So we're going to use ftp.cwd, which I'm guessing stands for change working directory. I'm not actually sure. And in that one, we're going to give it our FTP path, which is the variable up here we made, pub pasda.dep. Alright, so we've told it our host, we've told it to log in, and we've told it the path we want to look in. Then we want to, we're going to want to set our working directory within Windows so that when we download the file, it knows where to go. Kind of like when we downloaded it manually, it went to our downloads folder automatically. And we can do that using the OS module. So if we come back up here, this is another one that's just built in. You don't have to install this or anything. The OS module lets you do stuff like rename files and folders and delete files and move stuff and all the stuff you would do in File Explorer. Alright, so import OS, come back down here, and we're going to say os.chdr for change directory, I'm assuming, maybe, hopefully. And in this one, we're going to tell it the download folder, the variable up here, download path, sorry, wherever you want it to go. In my case, I'm putting it in that AGO upload folder. Alright, so then now that we've got all this set up, we can finally tell it to actually download the file. So we're going to use ftp lowercase dot is it RETR binary, retrieve binary, and make sure you pay close attention to this, or make sure you get this part right. We're going to do a string with RETR for retrieve with a space, and then we're going to do plus FTP file. So we're saying retrieve our file that we want. We've already told it where it is, so we're saying retrieve this file, comma, we say open that file as a workbook. I'm a little fuzzy on this part, to be honest. So quotes, WB, quote, quote, and then closing parentheses, and then we're going to do dot write, which is going to download the file and write it to our download path. Okay. Now, this is another step that, depending on where you're getting this from and what you're trying to do, you may or may not have to do. In this case, they are changing the file name every time they upload it. So next month will be 06, the month after 07, etc., etc. And with ArcGIS Online, when you update a data set, you can see that the file name of the data that you upload has to have the same name as the original file. So in my case, when I uploaded this, I renamed it from active 2020-05 to active_PA. Whatever. So you don't have to rename it when you originally upload it, but if you do, you need to remember whatever that is, because we're going to have to rename the file we just downloaded to match that file name. So let's go back to our variables up here, and we'll create one for our new file name. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could just write out the whole thing and copy this. We could say I want it to be called, in my case it was, I renamed it to storage tank locations _active_PA.zip. You could do that. You could here, I'm going to leave that. You could do, we could use os path.join, and we could say take my download path, and oops, I guess this should be commas. My download path, take my new file name, and what this does is it'll take the download path here. It'll automatically add your, backward slash, forward slash, one of those things. It'll add that, and then it'll add your file name. Well, so we'll leave it like that, but either way will work. Alright, let's go back down here. We'll say rename zip file, and we also need to tell it where that file is we just downloaded, since we don't explicitly have a variable for that. So you could do this multiple ways. You could, actually you can't write it, you could, I guess, include this, but the best way to do this would be, let's say it's the new data we downloaded, and we'll use the os.path.join again, and we're going to say we downloaded it to download path, so it's going to be that, and then it's going to be FTP file. So if we do it this way, we know our file name, telling it where our new data is always going to match whatever this dot format thing did to get the correct year and month. If we just wrote it out verbatim like we did up here, it's not going to work. But I mean, you could do this, and then you could do the dot format again, I guess. Alternatively, I mean, you could do new data equals download path plus, in this case, you'd want 2 slashes, because one of them is an escape character, or you could do the R, and then do plus FTP file. This is doing the same exact thing that os.path.join is doing. This is honestly a little more reliable. You know, you don't have a chance for messing this up, so we'll stick with this. And then we're gonna use the OS module again to rename the file. So we'll call os.rename parenthesis. And for this, you want to put in your input name, including the directory, and then your output name, including the directory or the file path. So this will be new data, comma, new name. So it's taking the file we downloaded as new data, and we're renaming it to new name, which will give it this name without the date, which matches what I originally uploaded it as. If whatever file you're using, maybe they're just overwriting it, like if this was just storage tank locations _ active and there's no date and they just overwrite the same file every time, you can skip this whole step right here. Alright, so after that, next we're going to want to log into ArcGIS Online. Or Portal in your case, maybe, whatever you're doing. Alright, and to do that, we're all the way back up here. See, these are PyCharm grays them out because I haven't used them yet. So the very first thing we brought in was ArcGIS.gis, import GIS. Now that is very confusing, but that's just, that's how it's set up. You know what, to make it even more confusing, create a variable called GIS. Actually, you know what, let's not, that's confusing. Let's call it puppy. No, that's even more confusing. You know what, I'm actually going to stick with GIS because it's saying, you know, we're using, this variable represents using this module, you know, as a variable. So with the GIS module, we're going to log into ArcGIS Online, and the first thing we want to tell it is the organization URL. So in my case, for my dev account, it's aaronkolker.maps.arcgis.com. You could put your portal URL here, but it should look something like that. Comma, and then the next input, you can see if you go through the pain of setting up PyCharm, it's actually pretty handy. It'll tell you all the parameters as you're typing them. So we have username next. We're going to use the variable we set up here. User, my AGU username. You don't have to. You could just, you know, put, you could write it out in here if you want. It doesn't matter. There's also ways where, if you wanted this to be more secure, you could have it set up where you have to type this in. Although the point of this tutorial is to set up something that'll run automatically. And we're actually, what we're going to get to after this script is we're going to use the Windows Task Scheduler to set a schedule for this script to run. In that case, I just want this in the script And assuming you're running it from a semi-secure location, it should be okay, but your situation might vary, I guess. But for me, I'm doing username, password, calling these two variables again. And then, I haven't really been using any print statements. I usually like to put those in my script, so you can kind of watch what it's doing as it runs, or to help troubleshooting. So in this case, just for funsies, let's do UN for username equals, and now that we're logged in, we can call this lowercase GIS variable we just created. So you can say GIS properties user dot username. And so what this is going to do is it's going to say find me the username of the user that is currently logged in, and save it as this variable. So then we could say print logged in as, and we'll use that curly bracket dot format trick again, just in case the username isn't a string for whatever reason. I'm sure it is, but we'll do format and then just put that UN variable in there. Right? Well, I guess I can't run this now because this is a fake password, unless it's not a fake password. I guess we could find that. No, we'll cut my AGO username some slack. I'll just show you the thing at the end. Alright, so what have we done? We've logged in. Next, I guess we need to find the item in AGO that we want to overwrite. So we'll call this overwrite hosted feature layer. We'll do this all in one section. And for this part, we're going to create. We're gonna grab our item based on the item ID. So we're gonna do a variable, and I'll call it data item equals GIS. So take my login information, look at my content using .content, and then get, and in the parentheses for here, or for get here, we're going to use item ID. And if you remember going back, that's the very first variable we set up. So you don't actually need that again. You could just take this and drop it in here instead of the variable, but we'll use the variables in case you ever want to reuse this script. If you have all your variables up here, you just know, okay, I gotta change these 4 things, and then the rest of the script will be fine. You won't have to comb through it. Alright, so we've got the item. This next step, I'm probably the most fuzzy on. I don't quite understand what it's doing, but it's just how it works. So the item we're grabbing is a hosted feature layer. We need to tell Python that we want to set it as a feature layer collection. From what I can tell, the feature layer stuff in this API doesn't have the overwrite capability, or I don't know, maybe if someone from ESRI ever watches this and you can clarify what this step is doing, I would love if you could leave a comment on that. But we're gonna create a feature layer collection. So we'll call it feature layer col equals feature layer collection, and we're gonna this thing right here we're calling all the way back from our modules. This second line here, from features we imported feature layer collection, so we're calling that, and we're gonna say we're gonna create the feature layer collection from an item, so dot from item, and the input parameter on that is going to be the variable we just made on the line above. So we said, using this ID, find this item in my content. And then now that you have that item, turn it into a feature layer collection, or establish it as a feature layer collection. It's important to note it's not actually doing anything to your item. It's just in the context of this script, we're telling it what it is so that we can overwrite it. But don't worry, it's not going to change any settings or do anything to this. In terms of feature layer collection, we are going to upload the data or overwrite the data. That's the whole point of this. But okay, so we've established it as a feature layer collection. Then we're going to say take that feature layer collection, so the variable we just made, we're going to use the manager, .manager, and we're going to tell it to overwrite. And we're going to tell it to overwrite using, oops, sorry, I forgot the COL here. And we're going to tell it to do the overwrite using our file we downloaded, and that's going to be, in my case, we renamed it to new name. So in my case, new name is where the file is that I want to upload. The zipped file, I guess we should have mentioned that earlier. If you're using a shapefile or hosted feature collection, it needs to be zipped up. If you're using a CSV file or an Excel table, it doesn't need to be zipped. And if you were to do any sort of analysis on your data before you upload it, like maybe you want to do an intersect and add some extra like county information or population information, you would want to do that somewhere in here, and you would need to write in some code to unzip it, in our case, then use ArcPy to do whatever you're doing, and then zip it back up, and then move on to this step. That's a little more involved, and there's so many different cases or rabbit holes we could go down. I'm gonna unfortunately have to skip on that for this video, but you could use something like shutil that's built into Python. That's that to do your unzipping and zipping. Or I think there's a zip. There's zip stuff already built in there. Google will be your friend in that case. But otherwise, all right. So this is doing the thing we spent all this time writing. This is actually overwriting, and that would be the last step. However, in my case, this os.rename line right here, if I have a file in there already, a new name file, this will throw an error. It won't be able to overwrite an existing file. So what we can do is call os again, just do os.remove, and then put new name. And so after the zip file is uploaded, the zip file gets deleted. And then when the script runs next month and it renames that zip file, it won't run into an error. There's also, we could really kind of flesh this out in terms of error handling. There is a situation we might run into where what happens if I try to run this script on June 1st, but they haven't uploaded the June data yet. As you can see here, they didn't upload this one until May 7th. It might grab an older file. That's probably what it'll do actually, but maybe if the file's not there, they deleted it, you would want some sort of error handling. Or you don't even really have to. It'll just fail. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you did want some sort of error handling, we could do in here. We could just do a basic try indent all this. Oops. Indent all this. So the script will basically try to run this. If it runs into some sort of error, then we can do except, exception as error, and then print the error. There's probably Python people shaking their head at me. I think this is very broad and probably frowned upon, but it'll, the script will complete. And then at the end here, again, I guess should try not to get tied down and all this. We're going to keep this as simple as possible. We'll just put a print statement at the end here that says script complete so that we know it's done. Okay, hold on. We can actually make this better. So if our script was to fail up here for some reason, after downloading or after renaming the data, maybe your login doesn't work, like ArcGIS Online is down or something, we won't get to this remove part, and then the next time you run it, you're going to get an error when it tries to rename the file. So let's actually move this outside of our error, or our try statement. And I can't remember if remove will work, like if remove will give you an error if this already doesn't exist. So what we can do is say if os.path.exists parentheses, and then we'll say new name with a semicolon there. And then tab this next line in. The tab, as a reminder, just means that it's part of this if statement. So what this will do is it'll check and say, all right, if this file that we've called new name, if it exists, if it's even there, then go ahead and delete it. If it's not, it just skips it. We'll avoid some errors. Okay, so let's check to see if this actually works. I'm gonna put in my credentials up in this script so that we can run it, but let's come to our item here in ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to enable editing and delete some of these points just so we can see if it's actually updating the data or not. So okay, click there. I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to click delete and delete and delete. Delete a couple more. Okay. This should be saving as we go, so I can go back. We can go to data, and we've got 11,628. Alright, so I'm just gonna put a note here. In a comment so that it doesn't actually run, but just so we can remember. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and give this a run. And actually what happened here, the job failed. And I think what that is I have this enabled for editing. We don't have time to go into it on this script, but there are things you can add to account for that in your script if editing is enabled. Let's go ahead and see if that's what the issue was. Okay, so this time it worked. You can see it says logged in as my username, which we did up here, and script complete. It's at the end here. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but my dog is eating food. Sorry about that. He's a big old 85-pound lab. Alright, let's go check our data and see if it worked. We've got 11,632, and in our script we had 28, so it looks like it worked, which is good news. Okay, so now that we've got a working script, you could manually run the script, but that kind of defeats the purpose of writing this out when, honestly, it's not that hard to come here and use the manual buttons. So we want to put it on a schedule and have it run automatically, and then we never have to look at it. In this case, it's being uploaded once a month, so it's not really a big deal if we needed to do it manually, but maybe in your case it's something that's changing daily or hourly even, and you definitely don't want to have to mess with that. So to do that, we're going to use Windows Task Scheduler, and before we get in there, we need to create a batch file. So to do that, it's probably easiest to just use Notepad. So open that up. You can, I just searched it in the search bar there. And the way this works is, in the task scheduler, we can tell it we want to run a batch file. And in the batch file, we include the program we want it to open, or the program we want it to run, and then the file we want to run with that program. So in our case, we're going to want to tell it to use Python 3 to run our script. And it's pretty easy to set up. First, you're going to put the path to your Python exe. So in my case, I'm using the Python installation that came with ArcGIS Pro. So if that's what you're doing, it's going to be this or something like this, depending on where ArcGIS Pro is installed for you. The program files, ArcGIS Pro, bin, Python, envs, ArcGIS Pro Py3, and then the Python exe. And of course, if you don't have Pro installed, you'll need to find wherever your Python 3 exe is located. Then we're going to put a space, and then we're just going to put the location of our file name, of our Python file. So for example, mine is here. It's in this weird roaming folder because of how PyCharm works, or how I have it set up. Oh, whoops, sorry. Alright, so in my case, this is where my Python file is located, the one we just wrote. If you had multiple files to run, you can actually, I found out the way the task scheduler works. You can just, it reads the lines in your batch file sequentially, so you could say, alright, open Python again, and then do a different file, and it changes to, whatever your other file is, and so on and so on, and that might be helpful to some people. I've had to use that before. But anyways, once you have this, it's just these two things. You go to Save As. I'll just stick it on my desktop just to be simple, but we'll call this my AGO data upload. And then you want to do .bat, tell it that it's a batch file. Alright, I'm going to save that, and if we come to my desktop here, you can see here's my batch file. So next we want to go to the task scheduler. So you just type task in your search bar here. You should see the task scheduler app. It should look something like this. And if you can click on the task scheduler library here in the left pane, and you can see all the tasks your computer's already running. This will be different depending on what's installed on your computer. Hopefully I don't have anything weird in here. And so, you can see, here's the task name. You can see when it's running, when the next run date is, that kind of stuff. So to create our own task, you can either right click on the library and go to create task, or you can go to action, create task. You need to give it a name. So let's do start AGO data upload or something, doesn't matter. And a lot of these settings are gonna just kind of depend on your situation, what you're trying to do. So for example, if you were running this from some sort of server or machine that's always on, you could say, run always, whether they're logged on, and then you can put credentials in there, or that might be helpful if you're running at like 3 in the morning and your personal computer's not on. I usually run with highest privileges. Go to the next tab up here, triggers, and this is where we're going to tell it when and how often we want our script to run. So in my case, let's say I want it to run monthly, and let's say I want it to run all months, and I want it to run on maybe the last day of the month, or I could do the middle of the month, or we could do weekly. Maybe I want it to run once a week, and that way, since I don't know specifically when they're uploading this data, it'll just catch it whenever it's there. Where'd we go? Alright. But alright, let's just say I want it to run monthly on the 30th or whatever. You can change these settings. They're pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to leave all this default. Alright, we told it when we want it to do something, and then we want to tell it what to do under the Actions tab. So we're going to go to New Action. We're going to leave it on Start Program, and we're going to go Browse, and in my case it was on my desktop already, but you're going to go to wherever you saved your batch file, and you're just going to click on that. So it's going to go to Start a Program. It's going to look in the batch file, and it's going to see, alright, it wants me to start Python, and it wants me to run this file. Click OK. Conditions, I'm just going to leave this all default settings. You can kind of read through it and see if there's anything you want to change, but it'll depend. So we can click OK, and you can see it put it down here. I'm gonna sort by next run time, so you can see May 30th this is gonna run. And that's really it. Trying to think if there's anything I missed. This video is already much longer than I was anticipating, so I guess we'll just cut it off here. I hope that was useful. Again, I'm making this video because when I had to figure this out, I couldn't really find a lot of information on how to do it, and there definitely wasn't a video about it, so I'm trying to rectify that, and hopefully this is helpful to someone. Actually, before we go, I think, just going back here, if you weren't using an FTP site, you could get rid of this entire section, and your FTP file up here, let's say it's somewhere on your network, you would just, instead of doing FTP path and host, your FTP file, you would just add the full thing. So, maybe it's on your C drive, and your documents, etc., wherever that file is going to be. And then this FTP file will be used in the rename in our case, but maybe you don't even need to rename. So you could actually maybe you use FTP file all the way down here when you're saying what file do I want to overwrite with. That might be the case if you're just using a CSV or something. Alright, I think that's it. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and if there's something you have questions about, or maybe something else you'd like to see and I know how to do it, I could do it in a different video. You could leave a comment. yeah, that's it. Have a great day.